Hello, my name is Leona Meditz. I am the founder and executive director of HCP Wellnet. I help dentists and medical professionals to improve the profitability of their practice. And with me today is Brett Andrews. He's the founder of the Fortress Company since 2011. So I think you'll agree he has plenty of experience to share with us, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for being here, Brett.
Thanks, Leona.
So let's start out with, in your experience, what gaps did you notice in the financial services that were offered to small business owners?
One of the things that I often noticed is that most business owners have most of their assets or most of their personal income flows back into their business, especially in the beginning stages. So often, as people grow the value of their business, they have less assets outside. So therefore, in the financial world, most advisory firms will turn those people away when they have financial questions because they don't meet their minimums. Where that was a problem for me growing up with different businesses in my family. Both my parents were business owners. So it was very important to me to be able to provide a full service situation. So that's how the Fortress companies came about, is that I noticed large gaps when a person's business ended up being their biggest holding. They not only didn't know the value of their business, so that they knew their true net worth or where they were looking to grow it to so that they could prepare it one day for retirement or exit or the next stage of their life, whatever they're looking for. And that was a big gap. So based on that, we developed multiple formats and strategies with 3 different businesses, and those are designed to help cover each of the 3 gaps that we found are the prominent things that business owners often have.
You know, HCP Wellnet is all about collaboration between physicians, the patient, and the dentist. And I see what you're doing is very similar. You're bringing all 3 services under one roof, so that they can collaborate and work together, actually talk to each other. So I'm sitting here shaking my head as you're talking, because as a small business owner and as a practice development coach, I see this every day, this need to collaborate and bring all of it together instead of you go here, you go there, you go somewhere else. So I'm really excited to work with you for that reason. So, how do these service gaps affect the value of a business?
Well, often people are not aware how a value of a business is actually built. Sometimes they'll have a CPA or somebody look at their numbers and they'll base everything off of EBITDA, or they'll look at some of the earnings, things like that, or they'll have a friend who told them they sold their business for X amount of, 2 times earnings or some number. And then some person will gloat about some higher number, but nobody really truly often knows what the value of their business is. And there's multiple ways of actually establishing that value. So where a partnership with someone like yourself is so important, and we work with multiple growth coaches, we let them do their expertise to build up the internal growth and value of the business, because one important factor outside of the financial numbers, which often will give you a fair market value, is to understand the intrinsic values, not only within the people, but within the processes, the methods, and all of the things that go into that business could add a multiple or 2 or 3 on top of what they might get just purely from the financials. So understanding that as an exit planner and being able to help the business owner understand how the multiple of their business grows based on the intangibles as well as the financials and the fair market value will end up getting them a much higher number, which then of course ties back to their personal situation, which is what brought me to this all in the first place. Is nobody knows how to plan financially if they don't know what they could possibly sell their business for. They need to know that number, and that determines when and how and what a timeline might look like for exiting their business.
Yeah, again, not even knowing how to increase the value of my business is just, that just adds value right there. Just knowing, okay, so I'm 5 years out from wanting to sell my practice. what do I need to start doing now to do that? And that is just information that can change it. To another point is what I have found is I help dentists to write structures for their business, and people that have a turnkey, not just an employee handbook, but step-by-step instructions on how they built the business. In their practices sell for sometimes double than a practice that just has the same collections or production that's down the street. So, you know, what if you knew how much having that in writing would do for you, and what should you change? They don't know. And so then it comes, they want to sell their practice and they don't have an idea of how to know what it's really worth. I think it's it would be highly valuable to be able to know the true value of your business before, so you can plan to increase that value before you exit. So tell me,
Absolutely.
yeah, how does a small business owner know the true value of his business? How do they even know?
Well, we walk through assessments, help them gauge a lot of different ways to value the business. First of all, starting with a pure fair market valuation is the way you normally would start. But then you start to look at other factors that will increase value for a buyer that's looking to buy. Now, it depends on the type of buyer. You have strategic buyers, you have financial buyers, you have multiple different types of buyers that would be out there. And if it's an internal transfer, I mean, that's an often confusing situation, because people think, I want to sell my business, they go look for a business broker. Well, that can work, but what if your internal employees, or you're bringing in associates to buy your business internally? That's not the realm of most of the business brokers. They are looking to sell it, and that's how they get paid. So in our realm, we look to see, how can we increase value? We first of all have to lay out a timeline, because unfortunately people decide, I want to sell next week. And the average timeline, if you do it correctly, is going to probably be at a minimum 2 years. That's the shortest, but it's probably going to be a 3 to 6 year plus time horizon to actually set up a plan correctly, build the multiples that you need, and be able to justify those for the buyers as well, and whoever they are to do that. So multiple things, though, as I was bringing up earlier, tie into that. And it's so important that people get focused on the day-to-day operations. They forget about all the gaps. So the wealth gap obviously is your personal situation, and you need to identify where your freedom point is one of the terms that we use, because that's the day when your funds match the amount that you'll need to live on the rest of your life at the lifestyle you want. So we can actually target that number and have that number designed from the very beginning. The next portion of that, when it comes to the risk gap, is that as you're valuing, or as you're increasing the value of your business, and as you're growing it, risk constantly is increasing. It's happening every single day, and it could be employees, it could be the value of your building, it could be everything that's insurable or even non-insurable, that people aren't even aware that sometimes there's not enough communication. And this goes back to the earlier question of one of the problems that I saw, is that not most situations, most of the advisors are separate and not communicating.
Right.
So that's why we brought it all together, so that we can all be on the same page, and sometimes that gap could cause a lot of problems in your life.
Yeah, and so here we've got a small business owner who had the courage to start from scratch, or even buy go into a lot of debt to start their practice. They work and work and work and work till they finally are making enough to pay themselves. They work and work and work more, and now they've grown it. And because of the time that it takes and the bandwidth that it takes to build his business, that's his only asset. And so now he goes to sell his only asset and doesn't even know what it's worth. I'm just so happy that you did. What a value that you offer small business owners, because otherwise, how would they know? And the other part I wanted to ask you is what's the difference between evaluating a small business versus big corporations? You said you grew up with your mom and dad owning a small business, but so what is different for them rather than just going to a big corporate firm?
Actually, yeah, that's a good question. So, both of my parents own businesses separately and individually, and that actually does bring it up to a good point. My mother was more of a lifestyle business. A lot of people think of themselves as business owners, and there's different types. Where there's a lifestyle business owner, which creates the lifestyle you want, but until you take it to the next step where you have employees and you have processes and you have methods that you can actually train people to carry on, that you don't have to be there. With a lifestyle business, if you're the professional yourself doing all of the work, I mean, if you're a surgeon or you are, the dentist in this example, doing all of the work, there is a lot of value that would be lost when you leave. Therefore, you have to be training replacements and having people fill a lot of the day-to-day work and getting the things off of your plate that you otherwise, when you leave, the value would go with you. So it's a constant process of training, keeping people in place, having those people stick around, having them stay contracted through employment agreements, as multiple other things, because that will increase value. If a buyer comes in and says there is a person locked into this position and they are going to be staying here for the next 10 years, I'm buying something that has a lot less risk, and people pay more for things that have less risk and have a process that you can demonstrate through recessions, ups and downs, has succeeded and continued on with the cash flow that they're looking for.
Yeah, when you sell a business that's successful, you have key people that help make it that. You want to retain them. They're an actual asset and have value to the sale of the business. So that would be an important gap to look at. How are you going to keep those people in this transition?
Absolutely, because it's
Yeah.
common that somebody might leave if they don't like the new buyer, and the value of that business, if you're on some type of contingency workout, which is a lot of times there's going to be some type of contingency workout for an owner selling, that if one of the key people leaves, that could dramatically affect the numbers and what you get in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even think of dentists who hire an associate dentist and then they don't know when to exit themselves. How long should they stay, bringing onboarding the new dentist.
Yeah,
Then if that dentist is a family member, it makes it even more complicated. So
yeah,
these are all things that corporate businesses don't necessarily have to deal with. They've already departmentalized. They've already got multiple the branding that is not based on one person, one
that's
owner.
true.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
also too, they also, because of the larger size, the higher multiple, the higher value of those larger corporations, they instinctively already know these rules, where sometimes things are on a handshake in a traditional hiring agreement where you don't put in an employment agreement. A lot of business owners that I have worked with and come in, they don't even have an employment agreement that tells a person, here's the expectations and here's what you are expected to do, and this is what your bonus or your golden parachute or your golden handcuff situation might look like if you stick around here for 10 years. And that really truly adds a ton of value for a buyer coming in, for them to know that.
yeah, absolutely. So, other than these things we've already talked to, how do you help small business owners to prepare to exit for their business?
Well, we start with looking at just an analysis of their gaps. We want to look at each of the gaps, and those gaps are personally the wealth gap. There's the value gap that we look at from the business standpoint of the value of their largest asset. And then we also look at the risk gap. Now, that risk gap kind of bleeds to both sides, or flows over to both personal and to the business. And it's very important to understand how that risk gap has components that are insurable risks and non-insurable risks, because that's where the planning comes in. Some people can go buy an umbrella policy, for example, or they can buy, in the example earlier, we were talking about potentially somebody leaving. Well, that's one way that could be bad, but the flip side of that is, what if they die? there might need to be a life insurance policy so that the person, that the owner, can replace the individual they just spent the last 2 years training with somebody that might need a higher income to be, that's at that same level than they previously were training up the person. So there's a lot of factors, insurable and non-insurable or structural, that would be set up to be able to help a person understand how to, first of all, know what their gaps are, because often people don't even know what gaps there are or that they even exist. And once you've been able to at least see through an analysis that we can do, it'll tell you, wow, okay, I didn't even know these things existed, or something I should be concerned or looking at. And then from that point, we help bring that to light. And then a person decides how they want to remedy those situations.
Yeah, so I'll be putting the link into some of these gap analysis tools that we've discussed. They're absolutely free to our listeners, so there's no excuse not to, see where you stand and kind of starting to understand the true value of your business. So, we talked about the minimum of 2 years before you wanted to sell, but what's optimum? When should a business owner begin planning for their exit?
I'd say from the day they open the door. It's a lot of the best business planning includes exit planning. You should always, as a lot of Stephen Covey fans out there say, start with the end in mind. What is the optimal business that you would like to eventually have the public know, have, your clientele be proud of being part of that business, or clients or patients? What is your end goal for everything there? That's where you have to start. So the end in mind. And also too, a lot of people have a business for the purpose of, they feel that they started it because they could do it better than maybe where they previously worked, or they were a technician to start with and decided to move into becoming an expert. Those situations are usually designed around providing value and the extra value that you believe you can bring. But over time, we get so stretched personally that the value could be affected, and you want to make sure that all these things are coordinated to really get to that end game.
Yeah, that's I love that, because now you're kind of leading into, which will be our last question here, is the legacy factor. You may not even want to sell your business. You may want to pass it on or sell it, but still have strategies to keep it what you built at play. Can you talk a little bit about legacy and how this all can work together for that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there's even a whole portion of exit planning designed around financial or transferring of family businesses. And some of the most successful family businesses that have transitioned either to the children maybe, or if not the children, oftentimes people become very close with the people that work with them, and they're almost like family. So there's a lot of similarities in those scenarios. That one of the best things you can do in that example is to start with everybody understanding that this business is constantly for sale, and we want to be building the value, and if you want to buy it, then you can be the buyer. But this is what we're doing. This is the objective, so that we all know we're always on the same page and nobody feels that maybe they were slighted if somebody comes in and buys it as a third party, but you always have the opportunity to be that purchaser, right? So in fact, there was a book I recently read called Every Family's Business, talking about that specific subject, that they went through as a family from day one, generation upon generation, which unfortunately generational businesses often fail by the third generation. Family businesses transition by the third generation. It's a huge percentage have failed, but the successful ones that have been able to do it have done it because they've followed a structure that they knew from day one, that this business is always for sale, and you need to be participating in its growth and helping to improve the business, and also participating in and being a potential purchaser and knowing that's an opportunity.
Yeah, I think so many small business owners develop a business that with a vision that's bigger than what they're going to be able to create in their lifetime. So how do they keep growing that vision to the next generation? So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experience, because Brett, the gaps are huge. And
Yeah.
this is really, it can impact everything that somebody's built over their lifetime. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
One thing you mentioned there just a second ago, if you don't mind, Leon, I'd love to throw it in there because often as I know that since you deal with dentists, you're going to have a lot of specialists that are in your field, and being a specialist really keeps you really ingrained in the business. And the strategy to create the most value and also keep your stress level down over time, which it will wear on you eventually, is the fact that you have to be building those processes and working with your team to build them up. So, in a test that we often do with people is take a 2 week or take a month vacation and see how the business is running a month later. And that's the best test to determine if it's truly at the best point that you can sell it for the maximum value.
That's a great thing to do. That's a great tip. So I thank you for doing this, because as this is published, you're going to be encouraging people to look at exit planning sooner than later and understand the gaps that they have for their personal wealth, for their business value, and for their risk evaluation. And so I hope that they will take the next step, and that is contact you for those free assessments, or contact me and I will make personal introductions for you with them so that we can work together. And so thank you for joining, and I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
You there?
Yeah, hold on just a second. I'm going to leave the meeting.